The airport lights dimmed as families embraced hers never came. Ellen Harper, 74, widow and retired librarian, clutched her suitcase tighter. Her children who begged her to fly out never answered the phone. By midnight, Evelyn's ticket home was already rebooked on her own terms. She was done waiting in terminals for love that never arrived, and when her children finally called, the line they needed was no longer hers. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. Linda double-checked the flight itinerary one last time, even though she'd already printed it, bookmarked it, and written it on the whiteboard near the fridge. Denver International, Flight 24-7, departure at 8:05 a.m. It had been years since both Aaron and Jessica invited her for the holidays. Usually it was one or the other, or neither. But last month's call had surprised her. Fly out, Mom. Aaron had said, we want you here for Thanksgiving. All of us. The kids, Jess, me. It wouldn't feel right without you. She'd smiled so wide her cheeks ached. I'll bring those pecan bars you all used to beg for. Jessica had chimed in. And that cranberry relish. The real one. Not the canned. Linda had circled the date on the calendar and spent the next 3 weeks baking, packing, cleaning. She booked Muffin, her aging terrier, into the quiet local kennel that always left her handwritten updates. She picked a soft blue sweater, the one she'd worn when her first grandson was born. She felt ready. At the airport, she pulled her small red suitcase behind her and smiled at strangers for no reason at all. It felt like the world was giving her something back. Family. Belonging. A seat at the table again. The flight was smooth. The landing. Her heart thumped with anticipation as she texted them. Landed. Can't wait to see you both. She stood near the arrivals curb, scanning every car that pulled up, every SUV that looked like Jessica's, every black sedan that might be Aaron's. Nothing. She texted again. By baggage claim, I'm near Carousel 9. Let me know if traffic's bad. She waited. 20 minutes. 40. An hour. Still nothing. She called Aaron. Voicemail. Jessica. Voicemail. She tried their spouses, saying. She sat on the cold metal bench outside arrivals as the crowds thinned and thickened again with the rhythm of incoming flights. She checked her phone so many times, her eyes started to blur. Another hour passed. A family with toddlers ran past her carrying tiny backpacks and laughing. Behind them, a man held a sign that read Grandma Nancy in big block letters. No one had a sign for her. By now the pecan bars in her carry-on were softening. The cranberry relish, tucked in a cold pack, had likely melted. Linda opened her phone and pulled up the last message Aaron had sent. We'll be waiting. Just text when you land. She had. They hadn't. The November air bit harder than she remembered. Colorado was colder than Florida this time of year. She rubbed her hands together and told herself to stay calm. They probably got stuck in traffic, she whispered to no one. Or the kids needed something. It happens. But a part of her, a smaller, colder part, had already stopped believing. Eventually she tapped the rideshare app with stiff fingers. The driver pulled up 10 minutes later, asked if she wanted music. She shook her head. She rode in silence. The houses in Aaron's neighborhood looked the same. Wide driveways, trimmed hedges, solar panels glinting on the roofs, familiar yet just out of reach. When they pulled up to the house, she hesitated. The porch light was on, the curtains drawn. A minivan sat in the driveway. She grabbed her bag, walked up the front steps, and rang the doorbell. Once, twice. No answer. She rang again. Still nothing. Linda stepped back and stared at the door, at the faint sound of a TV inside, at the porch she used to decorate with Jessica when she was little. She reached for her phone again, but her fingers hovered over the screen. They invited me. She pressed the doorbell one more time. She arrives, rings the bell. No answer. Despite lights inside, the welcome mat was out, but the door never opened. Linda stepped back from the door, waiting, still hoping to hear footsteps, voices. But the only sounds were the wind moving through bare branches and the faint hum of a television behind the glass. A porch light flickered above her. The same bulb, maybe from last year. She rang the bell again. Knocked. Waited. Still nothing. She turned to glance behind her, unsure of what she was hoping to see. Maybe one of the kids pulling into the driveway laughing. Gotcha. Or Jessica with a casserole in hand and a guilty smile. Instead, she saw a woman watering potted mums, 2 doors down. The neighbor looked up and blinked in surprise. She waved, a little hesitantly. Linda waved back and slowly walked down the steps. You looking for Aaron and Jess? The neighbor asked, setting down the watering can. Yes, Linda said carefully. I just flew in. They were supposed to pick me up. The woman gave her a sympathetic look. Oh, I thought you were already with them. They left yesterday, packed the car to the brim, ski gear and all. Headed up to Breckenridge. Linda felt something dislodge in her chest, something small and vital. Breckenridge? She asked, even though she'd heard her clearly. The woman nodded. Yeah, it's their Thanksgiving tradition, right? My husband said he saw them loading up early yesterday morning. Linda thanked her, turned slowly and walked back toward the sidewalk. The curbside pickup was long gone. She stood in place, unsure what to do next. It has to be a mistake, she told herself, but it didn't feel like one. By the time she found a booth at a nearby diner, the reality had caught up. She ordered black coffee and stared blankly at the menu. The waitress, kind-eyed and young, gave her extra creamers and a smile like she knew heartbreak when she saw it. Linda booked an extended stay motel 5 miles away, and checked in under a name she barely said aloud. Mrs. Linda Dunham, guest. Not mom, not grandma, not welcome. The room smelled of bleach and lemons. She didn't unpack. That night she opened Facebook and found the confirmation. Jessica had posted a photo an hour earlier. Her Aaron, their kids and their spouses, in front of a fireplace at a rental cabin in the mountains. Matching flannel pajamas. Wine glasses. Smiles. The caption read, "Family time, no tag. No mention. Not even a joke about missing one." Linda stared at the photo for so long her eyes burned. Her thumb hovered over the like button. But she pulled it away. It felt grotesque. Like applauding her own funeral. She got up, went to the sink and splashed her face with cold water. Then she sat back on the edge of the bed, and whispered something that chilled her more than the snow outside. They didn't forget me. They erased me. Linda whispers. They didn't forget me. They erased me. They left me in the cold. I decided not to go home. The airport was only 20 minutes away. Her return flight back to Florida was still valid. She could have called a cab that morning, boarded the plane, and slipped back into the humid quiet of her retirement condo. But she did. Linda stood in front of the motel mirror, brushing her short gray hair with slow, deliberate strokes. She looked tired, but not broken. Not yet. Instead of opening her suitcase, she opened the Notes app on her phone, scrolled until she found a folder she hadn't touched in years, labeled Start Over Plan. She had made it after her husband Dean passed, quietly, late at night, just a fantasy at the time, moving closer to the kids, finding a part-time job, maybe even joining a book club in Colorado. She'd researched neighborhoods, listed out volunteer options, even saved rental listings. And then, nothing. She never used it. She told herself it wasn't practical, that she was needed in Florida. That had been a lie. Now in that quiet motel room, she opened a browser and began emailing landlords. Her hands didn't shake. Her chest didn't tighten. It felt calm. Within an hour she had 3 responses. One was from a woman named Miriam, in Lakewood, who had converted her basement into a separate studio. Cheap. Furnished. Month to month. Linda sent a deposit. At the airport she approached the Southwest desk, and asked the agent to change her return flight to standby. Date? The woman asked. Linda hesitated. Later that afternoon, she walked past a church thrift store, and saw a faded sign in the window. Help wanted. Part-time assistant. Flexible hours, friendly faces. She stepped inside. The woman behind the counter wore a Christmas tree brooch and smiled without asking questions. Looking for something, she asked. Yes, Linda replied. A place to begin. The next morning she interviewed with the thrift store manager, a brisk woman named Janine, with reading glasses and a no-nonsense tone. They sat at a folding table surrounded by half-sorted bins of ornaments and old board games. You have retail experience? Janine asked. I was a school secretary for 25 years, Linda replied. Trust me, I've seen worse. Janine smirked. Start tomorrow. Holiday hours. Cash and tea breaks included. By the end of the week, Linda had moved into Miriam's studio, quaint, quiet, with creaky floors and mismatched dishes. Miriam was kind but gave her space. A widow too. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. That first night, Linda fell asleep without taking a single sleeping pill. It wasn't until the end of the week that her phone lit up with a name. Jessica. The text read, Sorry. Things changed last minute. Hope you're okay. No, I'm sorry we left. No, I wish we had waited. Just vague words and a timestamp 6 days too late. Linda stared at the screen, then flipped it face down on the table. The next day at the store she mentioned her kids to a woman named Shonda, who came in twice a week for books. I thought your son lived around here, Shonda asked casually. He does, Linda said. I flew out for Thanksgiving. Shonda blinked. That's weird. He never mentioned anything. Aaron comes in here all the time. Linda froze. He what? Shonda nodded. He drops off donations every couple months. I know it's him. He always writes his name on the receipt. Linda smiled politely. Her throat felt like it had closed. They never even said I was coming, she whispered later that night, alone in bed. Linda learns from a store regular that her children never mentioned her coming, not even once. She mutters, then let's see how they like being forgotten. I was never supposed to use that folder, but they gave me every reason to. Linda started setting her alarm again for the first time in years. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The rhythm of work, the thrift store's quiet bustle, the smell of donated pine-scented candles and old paperbacks, it grounded her. She clocked in, sorted shelves, helped elderly customers pick out puzzles for grandkids she didn't mention. She made labels in cursive. She smiled with purpose. The studio apartment below Miriam's house had become more than shelter. It had become hers. A new recipe card on the fridge. A crocheted throw folded at the edge of the couch. A framed watercolor of Colorado wildflowers she'd painted herself. Linda hadn't held a brush in over 20 years. Now she found herself reaching for it every night. Feels like you're blooming again, Miriam said over coffee one morning. I think I am, Linda replied, surprised by her own honesty. One day, as she was shelving a stack of vintage cookbooks, the bell above the thrift store door jingled. A woman in her 60s wearing a wide-brimmed hat and red glasses approached the register and asked if someone could help her find a book on grief. I've lost too many people in too little time, the woman said, her voice steady but glassy. I don't know how to make space in my life for anything else. Linda stepped forward and led her to the back section. They didn't talk much, the woman left with a book, but returned the next day with a coffee. You have a calm way about you, she said. Ever consider writing about your story? My story, Linda asked. People need to hear what it's like to be left behind, but still standing. Linda hesitated. That phrase, it lived under her skin now. She didn't know the woman was a columnist for the Denver Independent Journal. Not until she returned a few days later with a recorder, a notebook, and 2 scones. We'll keep your name private, she promised. But your voice, that's yours to use. That evening Linda sat at Miriam's kitchen table and stared at the blinking cursor on a borrowed laptop. She typed for hours, stream of consciousness, fragments of memory and hurt, the ache of the airport bench, the cold porch light, the way denial crumbles beneath humiliation. What would it take to forgive them? The journalist had asked. Linda had answered, without pause. A miracle, or an apology they actually mean. The next day, Jessica sent another text. Just saw the article. Was that supposed to be you? Linda didn't respond. Instead, she cleaned out her contacts list, removing old numbers, muting old threads. She deleted the group chat titled Family. Miriam made her a mug of chamomile tea and placed it beside her sketchbook. Are you all right? Linda stared at the screen for a moment, then nodded. Better than all right. She lit a candle, sat on the small couch, and began a painting, not of her kids, not of Florida, but of a woman in a red coat, standing in the snow, smiling at the sunrise. Linda learns from a store regular that her children never mentioned her coming, not even once. She decides, I won't tell them I'm still here. They erased me from their lives, so I started living a life they couldn't touch. Mornings in Lakewood began with silence and steam. Linda would open the tiny window over her sink, let in the mountain air, and boil a kettle for tea. No calls, no demands, no questions, just the slow return of breath. She walked to the thrift store each day, gloves in her coat pocket, a knit hat pulled low. She liked being recognized there, not as someone's mother or someone's burden, but as herself. Linda, you've got an eye for display, Janine said one afternoon. That end cap's actually pulling customers. It had been years since anyone said she was good at something. On Tuesdays, she joined a free community painting class held at the rec center 3 blocks from Miriam's house. The instructor, a retired art teacher named Carlene, let them paint whatever they wanted. No critiques, no pressure, just color and canvas. Linda's first piece was a messy watercolor of a dock at sunset. Her second, a cabin on a snowy hill. By the third week, she was arriving early, packing her own brushes, staying late to clean up. She hadn't realized how many hours she'd spent shrinking herself. One afternoon, while restocking puzzles, she noticed a familiar face browsing near the register. It was the columnist. Still anonymous, she joked, tipping her head. But people are reading, quietly, carefully. You struck a nerve. Linda offered a reserved smile. Anyone reach out? The woman asked gently. Not really, Linda said, then hesitated. But I haven't exactly made it easy. That night, over shepherd's pie, Miriam asked, if they really reached out, what would you want? Linda didn't answer at first. I think I'd want, not just words, I'd want understanding, an apology that doesn't come with a defense attached. And if they never give it, Linda shrugged, then I keep going. Her phone remained quiet. She turned off notifications altogether. At the thrift store holiday meeting, Janine asked if Linda would help coordinate the Christmas event. Linda agreed, surprising herself. She even offered to bake the sugar cookies shaped like stars. Miriam lent her an old tin of copper cookie cutter. They spent the afternoon dusting them off like relics of a past that somehow mattered again. Linda found herself humming as she mixed the dough. On her walk home that night, fresh snow started to fall, soft fat flakes that made everything look clean. Linda tilted her face upward, eyes closed, smiling as it landed on her lashes. She realized she didn't miss her children, she missed the memory of them. She decides she won't tell them she's still here. I watched my daughter at the store. She didn't see me, and I didn't wait. The grocery list was short. Plastic cutlery, hot cups, napkins, cider mix. Linda tucked it into her coat pocket and took her time walking the aisles at the local market near the community center. The store was warm and crowded, filled with the hum of carts and the sound of overplayed holiday music. She turned the corner near the bakery and froze. Jessica, standing in front of the deli case, laughing with a blonde friend, scrolling through her phone, tapping out she was wearing the navy coat Linda had given her 2 Christmases ago. Linda ducked back behind a towering end cap of pretzels. Her heart raced. She peered through the gaps in the display, half praying she wouldn't be seen, and half wishing she would. Jessica leaned into her friend and said, honestly, I think we dodged a bullet not doing Thanksgiving with her. She just exhausts me. Linda felt the floor tilt beneath her. She didn't even seem mad, Jessica added. Just vanished. It's almost easier this way. They both laughed. Linda turned and left her cart. She walked straight out of the store and didn't stop until she was back on the sidewalk, where the wind slapped the color out of her cheeks. That night, she sat in her small studio, flipping through the Christmas card drafts she'd brought with her from Florida. Handwritten messages for each grandchild, glittery stickers, a photo of her and Muffin tucked into each one. She slid the stack into the fireplace grate, lit a match, watched them curl and blacken and disappear. Later in her journal, she wrote, "Grief doesn't always come with death. Sometimes it comes from being alive, and knowing you're no longer invited." She closed the notebook, then opened her phone. A new voicemail from Aaron. "Hey Mom, just saw your text from before. Been slammed. Everything okay?" She played it twice, then deleted it. At the thrift store, she went back to work like nothing had happened. She hung garlands around the bookshelves, and sorted through snow globes and chipped nutcrackers. She smiled, greeted regulars, offered tea and peppermints, but something inside had gone still. Not bitter, not angry, just done. During her walk home one evening, she passed a lit window where a family was decorating a tree. The mother held the toddler while the father untangled lights. The child squealed with delight as the star was placed on top. Linda didn't stop, didn't stare, just kept walking. Linda gets a voicemail from Aaron. "Hey, just saw you texted. All good?" The more I stayed silent, the more they started to notice me. Linda didn't respond. Not to Aaron's voicemail. Not to Jessica's 2-word text that came 2 days later. "Everything okay?" She simply let it sit. No reply, no explanation. Instead, she poured her attention into the thrift store's upcoming Christmas event. Janine had handed her the reins without hesitation. "You've got the calm leadership we need," she'd said. And Linda had smiled at that calm. Leadership. 2 words she hadn't been called in years. She transformed the store overnight, stringing paper snowflakes from the rafters, creating a memory tree where guests could write names of lost loved ones and hang them like ornaments. She arranged holiday books by tone, gentle, grief-friendly, classic. Even the grumpiest regulars softened when they walked in. People started calling her Miss Linda at work. It felt strangely warm. The columnist returned to the store one morning, her cheeks pink from the cold. She held up her phone. "Your story," she said, "is making quiet waves." Linda blinked. "I haven't read the comments." The woman nodded. "Don't. Just know this. It's been shared on 6 elder support forums, community newsletters, Facebook groups for estranged parents. People feel seen." Linda wasn't sure what to say to that. She wasn't looking to be seen, just not to be erased. On a cold Wednesday morning, she restocked mittens near the front when she heard 2 shoppers discussing the article aloud. "Can you believe that?" one woman said. "Left her at the airport like that. Heartbreaking." "She didn't name them, though," the other replied. "That's strength. I'd have burned their house down." They laughed gently. Linda turned and walked to the back, her heart tight with something between gratitude and grief. The article had struck a nerve, but not with the ones who mattered most. Jessica sent another text. "Saw this article, you'd hate it." It wasn't an admission, it wasn't even a denial, it was bait. Linda stared at the message for a long time, then powered down her phone. That night, she and Miriam stayed up stringing popcorn and cranberries for the event tree. "I'm glad you stayed," Miriam said, threading a needle. "You've changed this place." "I think it changed me," Linda replied. "No," Miriam said with quiet certainty. "You just remembered who you were before they made you forget." On the morning of the event, a little girl handed Linda a cookie and said, "My mom says you're the reason this place feels happy again." Linda knelt down and said, "Well then, your mom's very kind." The girl smiled. "Do you have grandkids?" Linda paused. "I used to." Jessica sends a text. "Saw this article, you'd hate it. I was surrounded by strangers, but I'd never felt more loved." Snow dusted the sidewalk outside as Linda propped open the thrift store's front door. A stream of customers began arriving for the community Christmas party, bundled in wool, cheeks red, voices full of cheer. The old radio behind the register played Bing Crosby. Pine-scented candles flickered near the cider table. Everything glowed. Janine mouthed across the store. "You did this." Linda smiled and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "We did." Throughout the day, People stopped her not with pity, but with appreciation. A man in his 70s whispered, "That article, I sent it to my daughter. First time we've spoken in 8 years." A mother said, "Thank you. You reminded me to call my own mom while I still can." A high school volunteer gave her a paper ornament she'd drawn, a watercolor cardinal with the words, "You're seen." Linda didn't cry, but her heart thudded in that soft, unbearable way that comes when you're both proud and aching. Near the cider table, she set down a tray of cookies she'd baked the night before. Pecan, shortbread, the cookies. The ones Aaron used to sneak and Jessica would guard like treasure. People loved them. Asked for the recipe. She offered it freely. One woman smiled and said, "You must have had a family who loved this kind of tradition." Linda said simply, "I used to." Miriam arrived in the early afternoon, carrying an oil paint starter set wrapped in brown paper. "For you," she said, placing it into Linda's hands. "Keep going. You've got more to say." Linda held the gift like a fragile bird. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." It was the first present she'd received in over 2 years. By late afternoon, the store was warm with noise and light, laughter from the children's corner, chatter from the memory tree, quiet conversations near the book aisle. Linda stood in the middle of it all, and realized something stark. She didn't miss her children, not anymore. She missed what they'd been, who she had been with them. But that life was gone. And this new one, it was real. It didn't rely on approval, or permission, or forced affection. It just was. At 6:12 p.m., her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. "Jessica, let's get coffee. Just us. Tomorrow?" Linda stared at the message, her fingers cold around the mug of cider she was holding. No emojis. No love you. Just a question. She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she turned and looked at the painting hanging in the corner, her own from the rec center. The cabin in the snow. She smiled. Her phone buzzes. "Jessica wants to meet for coffee. Alone." She hugged me at the coffee shop, but her words never followed. The cafe was trendy, plants hanging from the ceiling, handwritten chalk menus, indie music humming low. Linda arrived 10 minutes early, and took the booth in the back. She ordered a black coffee. No sugar. No cream. She sat with her hands folded, back straight, her coat unzipped just enough to breathe. Jessica walked in 5 minutes late. She looked almost nervous, hair pulled back, wearing the same winter boots Linda had once mailed her for a birthday she'd barely acknowledged. She approached with a tight-lipped smile. "Hi, Mom." Linda nodded. "Jessica." They didn't hug at first. Jessica sat down, pulled off her gloves, and fidgeted with the edge of a napkin. "So, wow. It's really good to see you." Linda sipped her coffee. "You too." There was a pause, one that lasted too long. Jessica cleared her throat. "Listen, about Thanksgiving, that was honestly a mess. I thought Aaron told you we canceled the pickup. I assumed." "You didn't cancel," Linda said softly. "You never planned it." Jessica blinked. "That's not Mom. That's not fair. Isn't it?" Jessica's face stiffened. "Look, life is chaotic. You know how it is. Kids' schedules, planning. And sometimes things shift. We didn't think you'd mind. We figured you'd understand." Linda stirred her coffee with the end of her spoon. "That's the thing, Jess. You didn't think. You assumed I'd disappear quietly again." Jessica glanced away, then tried to smile. "Well, you've definitely made a statement. The article, that was bold." Linda raised an eyebrow. "You read it. Parts. Enough to know you're hurt. But Mom, airing it all out like that, it just creates more drama." Linda leaned in slightly. "I didn't write it for you." Jessica blinked again, lips parting. "I wrote it for the woman I used to be," Linda added. "The one who thought being quiet made her lovable." Jessica's tone softened. "Look, maybe, you come home for a bit. Florida's still your place. Regroup. Rest. Let this all settle." Linda set her coffee down. "I'm not tired. And I'm not coming home." A long silence followed. Jessica finally reached across the table, touching her mother's hand. "I'm sorry if you felt left out." Linda didn't flinch. "That's not an apology. That's deflection." Jessica sighed, and leaned back. I guess I just don't know what you want anymore. Linda looked her daughter in the eye. I want to stop begging to Matt. They stood to leave, slowly. At the door, Jessica gave her a hesitant hug, quick, light, like hugging a stranger in a receiving line. Linda let it happen. Outside, the wind picked up. Jessica turned right toward the parking lot. Linda turned left. She didn't look back. Later that evening, in her studio, Linda painted in deep blues and burnt umbers. She didn't cry. She didn't journal. She just let the brush do what words couldn't. Jessica later texts Aaron, "She's different. I think she's done with us." Aaron replies, "She'll come around. She always does. I always came around. But this time, I turned away." Linda stood in the middle of her studio with 2 large garbage bags and a cardboard box marked Florida. She took the framed family photos down from the shelf one by one. The beach photo, the Thanksgiving photo, the graduation photo where Jessica had smudged mascara but smiled anyway. She wrapped each frame in newspaper and slid them into the box, not angrily, not with resentment. The box would go to the thrift store donation pile, like the winter coats she hadn't worn in years, the set of placemats no table had seen since Dean died, and the handmade mom mug she'd chipped a decade ago and never thrown away. That afternoon, she called her real estate agent in Florida. "List the condo," she said, calm and clear. "Whatever price makes it sell before the new year." "You sure?" the woman asked. "Completely." Linda didn't say goodbye to the neighbors. She didn't book a flight back to pack things. She didn't need closure. Some doors just stay closed. She walked into Janine's office at the thrift store the next morning and asked for a blank calendar. "Thinking of staying past the holidays?" Janine asked. Linda nodded. "Thinking of staying for..." By the end of the week, she'd filed her permanent change of address form and filled out paperwork for a long-term lease with Miriam. Miriam blinked hard behind her glasses when she read it. "You're really doing it. I already have." They celebrated with tea and scones at the small round kitchen table. Miriam reached over and squeezed her hand without a word. On Sunday mornings, Linda began teaching a beginner's watercolor class at the rec center. 7 women signed up the first week, 10 by the second. They painted trees and teacups and wrinkled hands holding candles. They laughed about smudges and spilled paint. They shared stories without fear of judgment. "You're really good at this," one of the women whispered after class. Linda smiled. "It's just water and color." "No," the woman said. "You're good at this." One afternoon, as she walked home with her easel slung over her shoulder, she got a text. A group chat. "Aaron, we want to do Christmas together. Please come. Jessica, everyone misses you." No emojis. No apology. Linda stopped on the sidewalk. The snow had just begun to fall again. Light, dry flakes that danced rather than dropped. She stood still and let the cold sting her cheeks. Then she put the phone back in her pocket and kept walking. Linda gets a group text from Aaron and Jessica. "We want to do Christmas together. Please come." They asked again. This time I didn't even pack. The group text sat unread for 2 days. Linda didn't respond, didn't analyze, didn't ask herself what they really meant. On the 3rd day, while folding donated scarves at the thrift store, she opened the message again and typed, "I already have plans." She hit send, then turned the phone face down and finished sorting the scarves by color. Christmas Eve came with clear skies and a quiet stillness in the air. Linda spent the morning painting a snowy fence lined with lanterns, in the afternoon baking a pear galette from a magazine recipe that had caught her eye. Miriam came over in the evening, with popcorn and old VHS tapes of White Christmas and Little Women. They curled up in blankets, sipped hot cider and didn't talk much. That silence felt better than any family dinner Linda could remember. On Christmas Day, Linda woke early and walked through the neighborhood while the sky was still soft and pink. She dropped off coats at the community shelter and waved to a man sleeping in his car near the library. She left a thermos of hot cocoa on his windshield. No note, just warm. At noon, she cooked a small meal for herself, rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with garlic, and set the table with real dishes. For the first time in years, she lit a candle while she ate. Not to mark an occasion, just to be kind to herself. Her phone buzzed. Then again. Jessica, where are you? Aaron, we're waiting. Mom? Jessica at least text back. Linda looked at the screen, then turned it off. After dinner, she returned to her painting. She added frost to the fence posts and thickened the shadow under the tree. She signed the bottom with a name she hadn't used since college. L. Granger. Not Mom, not Mrs. Dunham, just Linda. That night she took the finished piece to the thrift store and hung it in the front window with a handwritten title card. Release. The next morning, as she opened up for the day, a woman stopped on the sidewalk, staring into the window. She pressed a hand to her heart, then walked inside. Who painted that? She asked softly. I did, Linda said. The woman nodded. It stopped me. I needed to see it. The painting catches the eye of a passing art teacher. The year turned, so did I. January opened quiet and silver. The snow stayed light and steady. There was no dramatic shift, no fireworks, no champagne, but Linda felt something stir just beneath her ribs. Clarity. She started the new year with a walk and a sketch pad in her coat pocket. When she returned, there was a note on the thrift store's bulletin board with her name on it. Linda loved your window painting. Come by the co-op. We have space. Nancy, Lakewood Arts Collective. She visited the next day. The co-op was small but warm, filled with mismatched easels, coffee cups and energy. Nancy greeted her like an old friend. Show us anything, she said. We don't care if it's polished. We care if it's honest. Within 2 weeks, Linda had a spot on the wall. A small one, above the bookshelf, where she hung Release beside 2 newer works. She signed each piece the same way. L. Granger. She submitted her bio under that name too. Not to hide, but to reclaim. That month, Jessica sent another message. We messed up. We know that. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Linda read it twice, then typed, I needed to leave to see what I was worth, and sent it. 2 days later, Aaron called. Not a voicemail, not a text, an actual call. When Linda answered, he said, I'm sorry, I should have said that the second you landed. She didn't respond right away. I don't even know why we did it. It was cruel. I think we just got used to you not pushing back. I used to believe silence was love, Linda said. Aaron sighed. I guess I thought you'd always come back. I did, she said quietly. But not to you, to me. She didn't hang up angry. She didn't cry. She didn't forgive, not yet. But for the first time, her son sounded like a man who had finally seen his mother clearly. She shared the story with Miriam that night over a board game and tea. I'm not angry, Linda said. Not anymore. That's growth. Linda smiled. No, that's relief. She walked through the thrift store the next day and saw 2 women whispering near her painting in the window. She's local, one of them said. Do you think she'd teach a class? Linda kept walking, quietly folding her hands in her coat pocket. Jessica asks to fly out and visit. Linda doesn't reply. When words fail, the truth still finds a way. The letter wasn't part of a plan. It began with a sketch, a crooked bicycle in front of a palm tree, something from the Florida neighborhood she used to walk daily. Linda had drawn it without thinking, just pencil and memory. But something about it unlocked a flood. She set the sketch aside and started writing. She wrote about Jessica's fever when she was 3, about Aaron's fear of thunderstorms, about the Halloween where both kids got sick from too much candy and Linda stayed up washing pillowcases, humming lullabies. She wrote about the night she found Dean's texts to another woman, and how she said nothing, because she wanted to keep the peace. She wrote about how silence became her only language, how motherhood had asked her to erase herself, inch by inch, and how she'd complied like a good soldier. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was just honest. She folded the pages, placed them in her sketchbook, and didn't seal them in an envelope. She didn't know if she'd ever send it, but it existed now. That was enough. At the thrift store, she met Lila. 17, withdrawn, clearly in search of safe air. She started coming to Linda's art class at the rec center on Tuesday nights, never speaking much, but always finishing her paintings. One night, Lila stayed after everyone else left. She helped clean brushes in silence, then asked, "Did you ever feel like you were screaming inside and no one heard?" Linda didn't hesitate. "Every day, for years." Lila looked down. "You don't seem like the type. That's how you survive." Linda said, "You make it look easy." 2 weeks later, Lila showed Linda her sketchbook, charcoal and watercolor bursts, full of pain and clarity. She hesitated before handing it over, like offering a wound. Linda flipped through slowly. "Do you think it's good?" Lila whispered. "I think it's true. That matters more." Lila smiled. "For real this time. Can I call you Miss Linda?" Linda swallowed hard. "Yeah, I'd like that." She walked home under a full moon that night. Her fingers were cold, but her chest was warm. Being needed wasn't the same as being used, and being seen didn't always mean being known. Sometimes it just meant being in the room when someone whispered, "You're enough." The girl asks to call her Miss Linda. Not Mom. Not forgotten. Just seen. Sometimes you have to leave to know where you belong, and sometimes it's not where you started. The flight to Florida was uneventful. Linda stared out the window most of the time, watching the clouds drift by like slow-moving thoughts. She didn't bring much, just a weekend bag, a folder with final estate paperwork, and her sketchbook. The moment she stepped out of the airport, the air hit her differently, heavier, wetter, familiar, but distant, like hearing a lullaby sung in a language you no longer speak. The condo smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. Her realtor had already cleared out the furniture. The walls were bare, except for a thumbtack left in the drywall above, where her wedding photo used to hang. She walked the rooms in silence. No sadness, just stillness. She opened every drawer one last time, touched the windowsills, then locked the door and left the key in the mailbox. On her way to the airport, she stopped by the women's shelter where she'd once volunteered. She donated 2 suitcases filled with clothing, linens and cookware, the last pieces of her Florida life. One of the women at the front desk hugged her before she left. "No one ever brings good sheets," she laughed. Linda smiled. "Everyone deserves comfort." Outside, neighbors waved as she passed, surprised by how well she looked. She no longer flinched at their polite smiles, or well-meaning curiosity. She didn't explain anything. Sometimes leaving was the only explanation needed. On the flight back to Colorado, the sun began to rise just as they hit cruising altitude. The sky shifted from charcoal to pale gold. Linda looked out the window and whispered, "I'm not the same woman they left behind." When she landed, her phone lit up with a call. "Jessica." Linda answered. Jessica's voice was softer than usual. "I didn't think you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," Linda said plainly. There was a pause. "I'm pregnant," Jessica said. "I wanted you to hear it from me." Linda blinked, mouth slightly open. "Congratulations," Jessica continued. "I've been thinking a lot about how we handled things, about how I want to do things differently." Silence. Then Linda said, "Then start with honesty." She didn't say "we'll fix it." She didn't say "I forgive you," because that wasn't how real change worked. But for the first time, her daughter wasn't calling out of guilt or convenience. She was calling because something real had shifted. And Linda heard, "Jessica says, I'm pregnant, and I want to do things differently." Linda replies, "Then start with honesty. They said they wanted me home, but I'd already found it." The leaves had long since fallen, and Colorado lay under a soft quilt of snow. Linda stood at her small kitchen table, brushing egg wash across a lattice pie crust. Outside, the street was quiet, but inside, warmth radiated from the oven, from the candles, from her own chest. It was Thanksgiving, but this time, hers. She didn't do a full feast, just what she liked. Turkey breast with rosemary, baked yams with cinnamon, green beans sautéed in garlic, and the pie, always the pie. The guests trickled in by 3. Miriam arrived first, carrying a sweet potato casserole and a bottle of wine. Janine from the thrift store came next, her son in tow, who immediately asked to pet Linda's dog. Then Lila dressed up in a deep blue sweater, and carrying a sketch she had made just for Linda, 2 cardinals on a branch. At the bottom, she'd written, "Thank you for showing up." Linda's small living room buzzed with soft chatter and gentle laughter. They carved the turkey in the kitchen. Nobody made speeches. Nobody needed to. At one point Miriam leaned over and said, "This is the best Thanksgiving I've had in years." Linda replied, "Me too." Jessica arrived late. She carried her newborn in a soft sling, her hair undone, no makeup, no performance. She didn't bring a dish. She didn't bring excuses. Just showed up. Jessica didn't take center stage. She sat quietly with Miriam. Let others coo over the baby. She helped clear the table after dinner without needing to be asked. And when she hugged Linda goodbye, it wasn't stiff. It was real. No promises were made. No emotional confessions whispered. But Linda felt the shift. Her daughter hadn't changed completely, but she'd begun to. Aaron didn't come. He sent a card, handwritten, apologizing again. "Still working on myself. Didn't want to make it about me." Linda read it twice, then placed it in the drawer beside her paintbrushes. She didn't feel hurt, just peaceful. That night, after everyone had left and the dishes were done, Linda sat by the window with a mug of chamomile and opened her sketchbook one last time. She pulled out the letter, read it from beginning to end, then tore it down the center, and dropped it into the fireplace. She didn't need it anymore. She didn't need to be heard by people who had finally started to listen on their own terms. Outside, the snow had started again. Inside, Linda stood up, stretched, and turned off the light. She whispered, "Happy Thanksgiving," not to the room, but to herself. Linda thinks, "They left me once, but I finally showed up for myself."